Have you ever felt a quiet trembling in the depths of your being, a sense that something invisible is shifting, not outside, but within? We are taught to measure our lives in degrees, promotions, accolades. But the soul does not shout through milestones. It whispers through the cracks. Today, I will share with you 9 signs your soul is rising, but no one told you, because these signs don't look like success. They look like confusion, loneliness, and liberation. Let's walk through these signs together, like stepping stones on the path of becoming. You feel lost, but not afraid. This strange paradox is the beginning of something sacred. You wake up and the world, once rigid with structure, now pulses with ambiguity. The familiar landmarks of your life, your job, your routines, even your cherished ambitions, no longer feel like they belong to you. They hang around your spirit like garments that no longer fit, woven for a person you no longer are. But this is not failure, this is transformation. This is the crumbling of the false self, the one that was assembled not out of truth, but out of fear, expectation, and survival. There is something deeply ancient in this moment of unraveling. In the depths of your psyche, a shift has begun. It is not something you chose, not consciously. The soul does not consult the ego before it awakens. It rises like a tide, elemental and inexorable, flooding the fragile walls that once held your identity. You have not been abandoned. You are being summoned. The world calls this disorientation. It mislabels your becoming as breakdown. But what they call chaos, the soul calls creation. Inside the cocoon, the caterpillar does not grow wings while remaining whole. It liquefies. It becomes a fluid, indistinct essence before it can reshape itself into a creature of the sky. There is nothing left of the old form, and yet, in that liquefied state, encoded in every molecule, is the blueprint of the butterfly. So too within you is the pattern of your truest self, forgotten perhaps, hidden beneath layers of social conditioning, trauma, and quiet resignation, but waiting nonetheless. This unraveling, this strange grief that comes without warning, is the moment when the deeper self begins to stir. The soul does not use logic to make its case. It speaks in tears, in sudden aches, in irrational joy, in the haunting sense that you are more than this. A woman once told me of her awakening. She sat at her breakfast table, the sun warm on her skin, a steaming mug of coffee in her hands, and she wept, not because she was broken, not because something was wrong, but because something was finally right. Her heart, long silenced by ambition and performance, had found its voice, and that voice said, "Enough." It was not a collapse, it was a birth. To those who haven't experienced it, this might sound like madness. Why would someone walk away from success, from comfort, from all the outward signs of achievement? Because when the soul begins to speak, the old definitions of success begin to rot. Because to stay would be to betray the most sacred calling a person can receive, the call to become whole. This calling will not negotiate. It will not wait for a convenient time. It arrives like a storm, dismantling what must be dismantled. And yes, it is terrifying, but beneath the fear is something more powerful, a quiet knowing that the person you were pretending to be is not who you came here to become, that your suffering, your restlessness, your yearning, these were never flaws, they were messages. We live in a world that worships certainty. It celebrates those who have a plan, who follow the rules, who climb the ladder without questioning if the wall is even worth climbing. But the soul does not live in straight lines. It speaks the language of myth and mystery. It guides us not with maps, but with intuition, with sudden dreams, with gut feelings, with the magnetic pull towards something we cannot explain. And so when you feel lost, when your life falls out of alignment with your former self, you are not failing. You are being refined. You are being hollowed out so that something vast and luminous can pour in. You are being prepared to become real. There will be days when you mourn what you are leaving behind. Let yourself mourn the identity you wore, even if it was a mask protected you, it helped you survive, it deserves your gratitude, but now you are being asked to go deeper, to unlearn everything that kept you small, to remember the ancient truths buried in your bones. You are not here to perform, you are here to embody, you are not here to win the game. You are here to step outside of it entirely, to ask whether the game is even worth playing. The soul has no interest in trophies. It seeks authenticity, integrity, freedom. This path is not easy. There is no applause when you choose to change your life from the inside out. The people around you may not understand. Some will fall away. Others will try to pull you back into the person you used to be. That is their fear, not yours. Walk on. Even when you are alone, walk on. The path will become clear as you walk it. And you will find, as the woman did, that the weeping is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of awakening, that every tear, every tremor of uncertainty, is the soul's way of clearing space for the truth. That truth may be unfamiliar at first. It may come in whispers, but it will grow louder, stronger, until one day you look in the mirror and see not the version of you the world demanded, but the version that has always lived inside. You will still wake with fear sometimes. That is part of being human, but it will no longer control you, because you will have touched something deeper, an inner compass, forged in the fire of your undoing. And once the soul takes over, there is no going back. You can no longer trade your aliveness for approval. You can no longer pretend to be asleep. So if you feel lost, honor it. If your dreams no longer make sense, trust that new ones are being born. If your identity is dissolving, know that you are being remade, not in the image of what others expect, but in the image of your own divine design. This is the journey home, not to who you were, but to who you were meant to be. And though the world may call it a breakdown, we know it as the most sacred form of breakthrough. The soul, once awakened, will settle for nothing less than truth. And you, even in your confusion, even in your trembling, are brave enough to answer its call. You begin to withdraw from the noise. It happens gradually at first, so quietly that you don't even notice it. The buzzing of conversation once felt like life, a current you waded into for warmth and belonging. But now you find yourself repelled by it. Small talk feels like sandpaper against your spirit, abrasive, grating, and purposeless. Crowds that once sparked curiosity now hollow you out. There is a kind of fatigue that is not of the body, but of the soul. And that is the kind of tiredness you carry now. This weariness is not a sign of brokenness. It is not a retreat into dysfunction or a failure to socialize properly. It is something deeper, something ancient stirring within you. It is not a collapse but a call, a quiet yearning for something real, something that does not perform. You do not withdraw because you hate people, but because you need to return to yourself. You do not turn away from the world because you despise it, but because you are finally learning how to meet it with honesty. The soul cannot thrive in constant clamor. It does not grow in fluorescent light or thrive amid the roar of competition and comparison. It seeks the still water, the quiet cave, the open field beneath a solitary moon. It seeks a place where it can speak without interruption, where its whispers are not drowned by the urgency of others' expectations. This inner movement, this craving for solitude, is not something new. It echoes down through the ages, woven into the stories of those who walked away from the world's noise to find something truer. The mystics, the hermits, the desert wanderers, they did not run from life, they ran toward essence. They stepped outside the city walls not to escape humanity, but to remember what it means to be fully human. Solitude is not exile, it is not punishment, it is sacred space, space where the self can breathe without needing to perform. In solitude, you meet the parts of you that have been hidden behind smiles and handshakes, behind polite nods and clever replies. In solitude, the masks slip, the armor loosens, and something holy begins to stir. You begin to remember that you are not just a reflection of others' expectations. You are not your job title, your social circle, your curated digital presence. Beneath all that, you are a mystery. You are the question and the answer. And this mystery can only be explored in silence. There is something profoundly brave about withdrawing. It is not easy to walk away from the approval of others. It is not easy to step into the quiet and face your own soul. The world teaches us to be visible, to be loud, to be liked. But the path inward asks you to be still, to be alone, to be unafraid of your own depth. That is not weakness, that is power. The soul does not shout. It does not demand attention. It waits, and when you have finally grown tired enough of pretending, when you have finally become disillusioned with the endless striving to be enough, it will be there, waiting, not with judgment but with gentle welcome. In this silence you start to hear truths that were always there, waiting for you to listen. You start to feel again, not just the surface-level emotions that are easy to name, but the deep, wordless tides that shape the very core of your being. You feel grief you never made room for. You feel joy you forgot how to recognize. You feel the aching beauty of being alive, raw and unfiltered. And in this space, something miraculous begins to happen. You are no longer drained by the world because you no longer approach it with pretense. You begin to interact from a place of fullness, not performance. You are no longer acting to be seen, but responding to what is real. From this place of solitude, your relationships deepen. You speak less, but with more meaning. You stop trying to fix people or win them over. You begin to witness them, honor them, meet them as they are. You stop participating in the noise, and in doing so you offer something the world desperately needs: presence. There is a kind of wisdom that only silence can give, not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of listening. It is in this stillness that intuition sharpens, that creativity stirs, that compassion is born. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people who have come home to themselves. So if you find yourself withdrawing, do not panic. Do not pathologize your need for space. Do not let a culture that worships busyness shame you into betraying your inner truth. You are not broken. You are awakening. Trust the pull inward. Trust the weariness that no amount of entertainment can fix. Trust the discomfort that arises in silence. It is the soil in which your soul is learning to bloom. What you are experiencing is not the end of engagement, but the beginning of transformation. In this sacred solitude, you will find not just rest, but revelation. You will find that the silence is not empty. It is full of answers. You will find that you are not alone, even when you are by yourself. You will find that there is a current beneath all the noise, something steady and true, something that has been calling to you all along. Follow it, let it carry you inward where the real conversation begins, where the self is not a brand but a being, where the soul, no longer drowned by noise, begins to sing. You question everything you were taught. Not in the rebellious sense of youthful defiance, nor in the cold skepticism of the cynic, but in the quiet, haunting recognition that something has always been missing. You begin to feel the stirrings of an inner movement, a trembling at the base of the soul. The lessons you memorized, the ideals you were told to uphold, the narratives you were taught to trust, they begin to unravel not because they are necessarily false, but because they are incomplete. You stare at the crumbling structure of what you once called truth, and a single thought echoes with terrifying clarity. Was I ever truly free? There comes a moment, sudden, or perhaps imperceptibly gradual, when a person no longer finds comfort in borrowed beliefs. This moment cannot be summoned or forced, for it belongs not to the intellect but to the soul. It is not a rebellion for the sake of rebellion. It is the birth of discernment. It is the soul demanding to breathe through the suffocating cloth of conformity. What once felt like certainty now feels like a cage. What once passed for wisdom now tastes like ashes. The inherited doctrines, the culture, the religion, the nation, even the family, are placed under a cold and unflinching light. Not out of disrespect, but out of necessity. The soul is no longer willing to wear masks. It longs for authenticity, and it will settle for nothing less. This is the beginning of awakening. Not a romantic, starry-eyed awakening, but one that rips through the fabric of comfort with the ferocity of truth. You question the rituals. You dissect the language. You notice the subtle programming that was fed to you like a lullaby, repeated so often you mistook it for your own thoughts. You begin to ask, not aloud but deep within, is this belief truly mine, or is it a hand, me down stitched together by someone else's fear? It is a frightening thing to pull at the roots of your identity. Like tearing away the vines from an ancient structure, you fear the entire edifice might collapse. But collapse it must, for what is built on the foundation of unquestioned obedience is not identity, it is imprisonment. This moment of doubt, this sacred unrest, is not weakness. It is the first cry of a soul that refuses to remain dormant. The soul does not awaken gently. It does not whisper. It roars, and when it does, it demands a reckoning. And so you begin to see with new eyes. The teacher who spoke of limits instead of possibilities. The parent who projected fear as wisdom. The institution that told you virtue lies in obedience. You begin to see how the very people who claimed to guide you often did so through the lens of their own unresolved wounds. This realization is not meant to breed resentment, but compassion. For how can the blind lead the blind except into deeper darkness? How could they teach you to fly when they were never shown their wings? The soul aches, not because it has been misled, but because it remembers a truth that was never spoken aloud, a truth felt in silence, in dreams, in the aching pull towards something more, something vast and luminous. That truth is not found in books or sermons or flags. It is found in the confrontation with your own shadow, in the courage to turn inward and face the parts of yourself you were taught to fear or hide. The awakening of discernment is a descent before it is a rise. It is the descent into the unknown regions of your own psyche, into the myths and monsters that were buried beneath polite society. To awaken is to step into the wilderness of the self without a map, guided only by an inner compass that no one else can read. It is to break the illusion that there is safety in sameness, that security lies in consensus. That peace is the product of silence. Awakening disrupts everything. It disturbs relationships. It unsettles careers. It calls into question the very foundation of your life. But it also sets fire to the lie that you were ever small, ever powerless, ever unworthy. The soul is not interested in comfort. It is interested in becoming, in evolving, in remembering. It does not care for social approval or institutional validation. It seeks truth even when the truth shatters the mirror. It seeks meaning even when meaning must be carved out with bloody hands. The soul does not want to be good. It wants to be real. You will not be praised for this path. There will be no applause for dismantling the illusions. Those who have not yet questioned their own programming will see you as dangerous, as misguided, perhaps even mad. But you are not mad, you are waking up, and waking up in a sleeping world is a revolutionary act. Socrates once said that the unexamined life is not worth living. He was not romanticizing suffering. He was naming a fundamental truth. When the soul begins to rise, it challenges every lie you agreed to out of fear, out of survival, out of the desperate need to belong. It is not an act of arrogance, but of profound humility. For to examine your life honestly is to admit you were wrong. that you were conditioned, that you were asleep, and then to step beyond the shame of that and begin again. Not with certainty, but with honesty, not with borrowed words, but with your own trembling voice. This awakening is not a destination, but a devotion, a vow to never again pretend, a commitment to see clearly, even when the truth burns, to walk alone if necessary, to lose the world and gain your soul. You are not broken for questioning, you are brave, you are not lost, you are becoming, and though it may feel like death, it is in truth the beginning of life. Not the life that was handed to you, but the life that only you can live. The soul is rising, and with it a deeper freedom than you have ever known. You face your shadow, not in the daylight of comfort, but in the trembling dark of unbidden moments. You are going about your life, following the well-worn paths of habit and intention, when suddenly, without warning, a storm breaks inside you. Jealousy like a fire consuming reason, rage that blinds, insecurity that whispers cruel lies about your worth. Memories long buried claw their way up from the depths like ghosts seeking release. You find yourself face to face with that which you've tried to forget, ignore, suppress. You meet the stranger within, and you are terrified, but this confrontation is not a mistake. It is not a failure of your strength or a sign that something is wrong with you. No, this is the beginning of a sacred journey. For the soul cannot rise unless it first descends. Just as seeds must split in the darkness of soil before they stretch toward the sun, so too must the self break open in the night of the unconscious before it can truly awaken. This descent, painful though it may be, is the call to transformation. You are being invited into the deepest chamber of yourself. The shadow is not your enemy, it is not evil, it is not there to ruin your life. The shadow is your own self, cast aside and forgotten, knocking at the door of your consciousness, begging to be seen, heard, embraced. It is every part of you that was unloved, misunderstood, punished, or shamed. It is the angry child, the desperate adolescent, the silenced dreamer, the lover who was never allowed to speak. And when these pieces rise, not to destroy but to be acknowledged, you must resist the old temptation to run. It is so easy to recoil in disgust or fear when these feelings come. You have been taught to wear a mask, to present only your brightest, best self to the world. You were told that anger is dangerous, that sadness is weakness, that longing is shameful. And so you split yourself. You became half a person, wearing your smile like armor, burying the rest. But what is buried is not dead. It is merely waiting, and now it waits no longer. To hold your wounds gently is the most courageous act. Not to analyze them away, not to drown them in distraction, but to sit with them, to feel them, to say to that jealous part, I see you, to look at your rage and whisper, you are part of me, to hold your trembling insecurity and murmur, I will not abandon you. This is not weakness. This is the fiercest strength. Because only when the shadow is brought into the light can it be transformed. In this sacred meeting with yourself, you begin to understand a profound truth. Nothing within you is unworthy of love. Nothing needs to be exiled. Everything you are, every memory, every emotion, every impulse, has a purpose, a voice, a place, and when you stop dividing yourself, you become whole. This is not a quick process. It is not neat, it does not happen overnight, but it is the only path to true liberation. You must understand that the shadow often appears in disguise. It will show up in the people who irritate you, in the relationships that trigger you, in the moments that make you recoil in embarrassment. It is in the friend you envy, the partner who makes you feel small, the parent you blame. Every time you react with disproportionate emotion, the shadow is whispering, look here, this is where you are unhealed. And the world, in its strange wisdom, conspires to keep placing these mirrors before you until you finally choose to look. And when you do, something miraculous begins. Not only do you reclaim the parts of yourself you abandoned, but you also gain access to a new kind of power. Because hidden in the shadow are not just your wounds, but your gifts. The intensity of your anger is the force of your passion. The depth of your sadness is the measure of your empathy. The rawness of your insecurity is the birthplace of your humility. These are not flaws to be fixed. They are energies to be integrated. To face the shadow is to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. It is to return to your original self, unashamed and whole. But to do so, you must walk through the fire. You must be willing to feel what you have avoided. You must let go of the illusion of perfection and make peace with your humanity. Only then can you stop performing your life and begin living it. There is great loneliness in this process. Few will understand what you are doing. Many will tell you to just be happy, to stay positive, to get over it. But you are not here for comfort. You are here for truth. You are here to become who you truly are. And that journey demands solitude, courage, and a fierce commitment to your own soul. So when the darkness comes, do not run, sit with it, breathe through it. Ask it what it has come to teach you, and listen, truly listen, because it is in those moments, when you are cracked open and raw, that you are being shaped into something new. The shadow is not a curse. It is a guide, and if you dare to follow it, it will lead you not into destruction, but into rebirth. This is the alchemy of the self, not to eliminate your darkness, but to integrate it, not to become someone else, but to finally become yourself. And when you do, when you have walked through the valley and made peace with your pain, you will rise, not because the darkness is gone, but because it no longer controls you. You will have learned that love is not the absence of brokenness, but the embrace of it. And that is how you begin to heal, not by striving to be flawless, but by finding beauty in your scars, not by erasing your past, but by honoring it, not by escaping your shadow, but by dancing with it. For the soul does not grow by running from the night. It grows by making the night its home and lighting a fire within it. In that fire you will find your strength. In that fire you will find your purpose. In that fire you will find yourself. There is a moment in life, often subtle, almost imperceptible, when something shifts within the human spirit. What once sparked rage now evokes sorrow. What once demanded retribution now beckons understanding. This transformation, though invisible to the eye, is seismic in the heart. It is not the product of weakness, but of inner expansion and elevation of the soul beyond the smallness of ego. It is the quiet victory of compassion over resentment, of depth over reaction, of transcendence over reactivity. When the soul rises, the scenery changes, not externally, but inwardly. The familiar terrain of judgment, blame, and bitterness gives way to new landscapes, empathy, mercy, and grace. It is not that the offenses committed against us are forgotten, nor are they excused. Rather, we begin to see the pain behind the infliction, the wound behind the weapon. We come to understand, without needing to condone, that suffering perpetuates suffering. Hurt people, not as a justification, but as an invitation to see beyond the surface. This rising is not instant. It is not the consequence of a single revelation, but the slow alchemy of lived experience, reflection, and a willingness to suffer consciously. In this slow burning, the ego's desire to punish dissolves into the soul's deeper longing, to liberate not only itself but others from the chains of pain, to see the person who wounded you, and instead of constructing walls of resentment, offer the silent prayer, "May you find peace. May you heal." It is in this moment of silent goodwill toward those who once broke us that we discover the full strength of our being. It takes no strength to hate. Hatred is easy, reactive, impulsive. The real test lies in the capacity to love without conditions, to release someone from the prison of your rage, even when they have not earned it, even when they have not changed. This is the mark of true maturity. Yet when they do change, when their journey finally aligns with remorse or redemption, the healing becomes mutual. There is no greater relief than to witness the awakening of one who once lived in darkness, and to recognize your own heart no longer holds them hostage. I recall a story. A man spoke of his father, a man who had been cold, cruel, and distant throughout his childhood. For years, the son carried the weight of abandonment, the bitterness that calcifies in the absence of love. Yet, after 2 decades, he forgave his father, not because an apology was offered, but because change was witnessed. The father softened. The hardness that had defined his presence gave way to gentleness, perhaps brought on by age, regret, or his own inner reckoning. In that transformation, the son saw something more powerful than words. He saw truth, and in that truth he chose release. This is what elevation looks like. Not the grand gestures of spiritual superiority, but the quiet, steady emergence of mercy where once there was only pain. It is the refusal to become what hurt us. It is the insistence that the cycle ends with us. We don't pass the pain onward. We metabolize it, transmute it, and let it become the soil in which compassion grows. Many people believe that to forgive is to be naive, to open oneself up to further injury. But this is a misinterpretation born of fear. Forgiveness, in its truest sense, is not an act of allowing harm, but of reclaiming agency. It is to say, I will no longer carry your shadow as my burden. It is an act of self-respect, of liberation, when you forgive, not necessarily with words or reconciliation, but with a decision of the heart. You untether yourself from the grip of the past. You move forward lighter, not because the past did not matter, but because you no longer allow it to define you. And in that liberation, something astonishing happens. You begin to see even your enemies not as villains, but as carriers of pain themselves. You do not excuse their behavior, but you understand its roots. You begin to see the child inside the tyrant, the wound inside the abuser, the loneliness inside the manipulator. You begin to understand that behind every harmful act is a person who has not yet healed, who has not yet awakened. This vision is not sentimental. It is not a denial of justice or consequence. Rather, it is a sacred clarity. The soul that sees in this way has moved beyond survival mode into a realm of true power. The power to feel without drowning, to care without collapsing, to hope without illusion. You do not lose your edges when you grow. You gain direction, you gain discernment, yes, but you no longer need to armor your heart to feel safe. You know who you are, and from that knowing, you can offer grace without fear, love without condition. That is the highest freedom. Indeed, life has a strange way of testing our capacity for love through the people who seem least deserving of it. These are our greatest teachers, not because they were right, but because they forced us to become more. More aware, more resilient, more expansive. They revealed to us what we would not otherwise see, that we are capable of extraordinary depths of empathy, if only we allow ourselves to reach for it. And in this reaching, we are transformed. We are no longer confined by the roles of victim and perpetrator. We step into the greater drama of human evolution, where healing becomes the revolution, where inner peace becomes the act of rebellion, where compassion is not a weakness, but a fierce, unyielding strength. There is a reason the world aches for kindness. There is a reason why, when we witness someone respond to cruelty with gentleness, we are moved to tears. It reminds us of what is possible. It awakens the memory of who we are beneath the armor of our pain. It tells us that no matter how broken the world may seem, there are souls walking among us who carry light, and who are not afraid to shine it even in the darkest places. To feel compassion for those who have hurt you is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your mastery. It is the threshold of your becoming, and once you cross it, you will never look at life the same way again. You will see the suffering behind the mask. You will hear the cry in the silence. You will feel the human heart in all its fragile courage. And perhaps then you will whisper a prayer into the void, not only for your own healing, but for the healing of those who could not give you what you needed. And that prayer, born not from need but from love, will echo through eternity. There comes a point in the human experience when the ticking of the clock no longer commands the same urgency it once did. You may find yourself standing at the edge of an ordinary moment, only to feel something ineffable rise within you, an invitation not to do more but to be more. You look up, and a single leaf, unremarkable in its smallness, drifts lazily from a tree branch, and in that moment everything, your plans, your calendar, your anxieties, falls away. Time halts, not as if it were broken, but as if it were bowing to something greater. And in this stillness, in this silence, the soul begins to speak. There is a subtle yet seismic shift when one begins to sense that time feels different. It is not the same as simply slowing down or practicing patience. It is the collapse of the illusion that life is a race. This awakening does not arrive with fanfare or thunder. It often comes softly, like dusk folding into night, and yet its implications are profound. You begin to see that time, as it is measured by clocks and schedules, is but a thin skin stretched over something vaster. Beneath that skin is a depth that does not measure life in minutes, but in meaning. This shift is not an abandonment of responsibility. It is a reclamation of authenticity. When presence begins to matter more than productivity, you are not becoming less, but more fully yourself. The part of you that once counted days now begins to feel them. The deadlines you once chased begin to dissolve, not because they are unimportant, but because something more vital has emerged. You find value not in the quantity of things done, but in the quality of your awareness. In the laughter of a child, something ancient awakens. It is not just joy, it is recognition. You remember, if only for a fleeting second, what it was like to live without fragmentation, without hurry, without fear of the future. The soul, which has always known how to dwell in the eternal, begins to stretch and breathe again. Its language is not linear. It speaks not in tasks or plans, but in moments that shimmer with truth. And so, your orientation shifts. You begin to move not toward a goal, but from a center. This center is not located in the world of appearances. It is rooted in the unseen, the intuitive, the archetypal realms where symbols speak louder than facts. When you sense time bending and stretching, when you see a shadow pass across your day and feel its echo in your chest, it is not confusion. It is communion. You are stepping into a dance with the divine, and the tempo is not rushed. To live in this awareness is to enter sacred territory. It is to sit at the altar of each moment, knowing it will never come again, and yet it is always here. The paradox of time is that while it appears to carry us forward, it can also bring us inward. It can be a spiral instead of a line. In that spiral, there are echoes of the past and whispers of the future, all contained within the heartbeat of the now. When you begin to trust this spiral, life stops being a problem to solve and becomes a mystery to engage. You no longer look at your schedule and ask, "What do I have to get done today?" but rather, "What does this day ask of my soul?" This is not weakness, it is wisdom. For in this mode of being you are no longer a slave to time, but a steward of it. You do not spend time, you tend to it, and in tending you begin to notice things you never had time to notice before, the way light filters through curtains at dawn, the stillness in the room after someone speaks a truth, the quiet way grief settles into the bones like winter. You begin to hold moments the way one might cradle a fragile relic, not because they are fleeting, but because they are infinite. There is pain in this awakening, too, for you will look back and see how much of your life was lived in exile from the present. You will grieve for the days lost to hurry, the words said without listening, the beauty missed while chasing something you never quite caught. But do not look away. This grief is holy. It is the price of coming home. The soul is not concerned with efficiency. It does not ask for speed. It longs for depth. It longs to drink from the well of a moment until the moment overflows. And when we align with this longing, time no longer threatens us with its passing. It invites us into participation. We begin to collaborate with life instead of conquer it. Do not be alarmed if others do not understand this transformation. The world often praises acceleration and ridicules reverence, but this is not a path for the many. It is a path for the sincere, and while it may feel lonely at times, you are never alone. For every time you stop and notice the sacred in the mundane, you are in the company of all who have ever awakened. Let the leaf fall, let the laughter echo, let the minutes stretch into something you cannot name. This is the soul, singing in the oldest language there is, the language of presence, the language of depth, the language of the eternal. Listen closely, your life is speaking. There comes a moment in the quietude of life, often when the external clamor has stilled, or when the carefully laid patterns of duty and routine have frayed, that an unexpected urge stirs from within. A brush is picked up, a melody hummed, a story begun in a notebook whose pages had long lain blank. It is not reason that guides the hand in these moments, nor ambition, nor the allure of recognition. Rather, it is something more ancient, more primal, an impulse that emerges not from the mind, but from the depth of the being. It is not a voice that can be rationally explained, yet it speaks in a language older than words. You feel compelled to create, even if it makes no sense. This compulsion is not born of logic. It arises as if summoned by some unseen force, timeless and insistent. In a world that measures worth by utility and output, the act of creating something seemingly purposeless can feel subversive, even foolish. But it is precisely this apparent foolishness that reveals its sacred nature. The soul does not calculate. It remembers, it longs. It reaches through layers of amnesia and distraction to remember what it once knew, what it once touched. It seeks to make visible what is invisible, to bring forth beauty not as decoration, but as testimony. We are, all of us, children of the mystery. There is something in the human spirit that aches not only to understand life, but to experience it deeply, to feel its richness pour through us like music, through an open window. And when the soul awakens to itself, when it stirs from its long sleep beneath the noise of the world, it begins to speak, not in speeches or doctrines, but in color, rhythm, image, and form. It paints and writes and sings not to be admired, but to heal its own fragmentation. In creation we recover ourselves. The rising soul cannot remain silent. When it begins to ascend, to remember its origin beyond the merely material, it finds itself pressed to express, not from vanity, but from necessity. Just as a tree cannot help but blossom in spring, the soul cannot help but express its flowering. Art, in this sense, is not entertainment. It is emergence. It is not a product to be sold, but a path to be walked, a mirror in which the self begins to see itself clearly, perhaps for the first time. You may wonder why you are drawn to write poems that no one reads, or why your hands tremble as you sketch the outlines of a dream you cannot name. You may feel foolish as you stay up at night writing verses to no one, or spend hours humming songs that vanish into silence. But these acts are not wasted. They are offerings. They are rituals of remembrance. In them the soul breathes. It reaches toward wholeness, toward integration, toward the light that once illuminated its earliest knowing. The world will tell you these things do not matter, that they are impractical, childish, indulgent. The world, too, has forgotten. It lives under a spell, caught in the trance of productivity and profit, where only what can be measured is seen as real. But deep beneath this veil lies another truth, that creation is sacred, and that to create is to participate in the unfolding of the cosmos itself. The artist is not merely one who makes. The artist is one who listens, who receives, who dares to translate the ineffable into something we can touch, feel, and be changed by. When you write, even if the words come haltingly and seem to vanish in the wind, you are carving a doorway through which your soul can step into the world. When you paint, even if the brush moves without plan or precision, you are allowing something larger than yourself to speak through you. When you sing, even if your voice trembles, you are echoing the ancient call of life that once gave rise to the stars. These expressions, fragile, ephemeral, unpolished, are sacred. They are signs that you are alive in the deepest sense, that something within you remembers that life is not only to be survived, but to be experienced, embraced, and adorned. Beauty is not a luxury. It is the language of the divine whispered through human hands and hearts. When you create, you are not just making art. You are restoring the sacredness of the ordinary, re-enchanting the world piece by piece. This is why the act of creation feels like home, why time slips away when you are immersed in it, because in those moments, the boundaries between the self and the eternal blur. You are not trying to be someone else. You are returning to who you were before the world told you who to be. You are not performing, you are remembering, and through that remembering, you become a vessel for something vast and mysterious. You may never show what you create to another soul. That does not diminish its power. It is not the applause of others that gives creation its meaning. It is the transformation it brings within. To create is to reclaim a part of yourself that has been silenced. It is to speak when the world would have you mute. It is to say, "I am here," in a voice that cannot be erased. So when you feel the stirring, the strange urge to pick up a brush, a pen, a chord, listen to it. Do not ask why. Do not demand a result. Let yourself be drawn. Let yourself remember, for in that moment you are touching something eternal. And in a world so hungry for truth, for meaning, for beauty, your small act of creation becomes a light in the dark, a flame that says, quietly but unmistakably, the soul is alive. There comes a moment in the journey of awakening when a person, peering deeply into the abyss of their own existence, discovers something both terrifying and magnificent. It is the realization that you are, simultaneously, so infinitesimally small in the grand design of the universe, and yet within you stirs the entirety of that very same universe. The stars, the void, the ancient pulse of time, the silent whisper of galaxies beyond comprehension, all of it dwells within you, just as you dwell within it. This revelation is not an idea one reads in a book or hears in a sermon. It is something one feels, like the slow opening of 1,000-year-old door deep within the psyche, letting in the winds of eternity. To understand this paradox is to undergo a fundamental transformation of the soul. No longer do you stand as a conqueror, poised to subdue life's wilderness. No longer do you wear the illusion that control equals mastery. Instead, you begin to move differently, more like a dancer than a warrior. Life ceases to be a battlefield and becomes a rhythm. The chaos is no longer something to fear or dominate, but a kind of music that beckons you to sway with it, to yield and flow and be moved. In this dance, the soul remembers itself. This awakening does not come with fanfare. It arrives like a quiet storm in the night, rearranging everything while the world sleeps. You look at the stars, and for the first time they do not feel distant. They feel like home, and yet you see yourself more clearly as a fleeting flicker of consciousness, vulnerable, passing, momentary. This dual awareness of being so small, yet holding infinite vastness, does not lead to despair. It leads to awe. The ego, that great deceiver, does not surrender easily. It will whisper of your separateness, your need to outshine, to outlast, to prove. But in the light of this revelation, the ego's voice grows hollow. What victory can there be in domination when all things are woven of the same thread? What meaning is there in conquest when the mountain you scale is built of the same dust that forms your bones? You do not need to become more than others. You already are more than you understand. You are not required to reach beyond yourself to find the divine it breathes within your very cells, in the quiet between heartbeats. And so you begin to surrender, not in defeat, but in reverence. You surrender the old maps, the outdated myths of who you thought you were. You surrender the lie that you are alone, that life is something happening to you rather than through you. You become still, you listen, and in that stillness the song of the universe becomes audible, not through sound but through feeling, through intuition. A knowing arises that is older than language, the knowing that you belong. It is here that the healing begins. No longer at war with yourself or the world, you allow your wounds to speak. You trace them not as scars of failure, but as sacred writings, proof that you have lived, that you have felt deeply, that you have been broken and rebuilt. Pain loses its sting when viewed through this lens. It becomes part of the larger story, the necessary friction that shapes a soul. You begin to see others differently as well, no longer as obstacles or mirrors or enemies, but as fellow travelers bearing the same cosmic fire. You sense their grief, their joy, their dreams like ripples in your own heart. Empathy deepens, connection intensifies. The boundary between self and other begins to dissolve, not into formless unity, but into an exquisite harmony of difference. Each person is a note in the great symphony, and you realize that your task is not to out-sing them, but to find your note and sing it with all your might. In this way, responsibility deepens. When you know the ocean lives in you, you can no longer poison the waters. When you feel the stars in your blood, you cannot dim their light with cruelty or indifference. Every act becomes sacred, every word a spell, every gesture a message to the universe. You begin to live with intention, not out of fear of judgment, but out of love for the immense and fragile beauty of existence. The paradox becomes your teacher. It humbles you each time you attempt to claim superiority or certainty. It whispers that the answers you seek are not always meant to be found, but lived. It reminds you that mystery is not the enemy of truth, but its very soil. The more you let go of needing to grasp everything, the more the truth opens itself to you slowly, like a flower in the dawn. You realize at last that the journey was never about becoming something more. It was about remembering what you already are. Not the story you've told yourself, not the roles you've played, not the accolades or failures, but the deeper self, the eternal presence that has watched silently behind your eyes since the beginning, the one who has always known the ocean because it is the ocean. And when the world around you trembles with change, as it always will, when relationships end, when empires fall, when your own body begins to falter, you will not panic. You will grieve, yes, you will ache. But you will not forget. You will know that beyond all form, beyond all structure, something remains, something that cannot be lost or broken, the still point in the center of the storm, the drop that remembers it is the sea. To live from this place is not easy. It requires courage. It demands the shedding of everything false. It will take you to the edges of your comfort and push you off the cliff of certainty. But it will also give you wings you never knew you had. You will fly not above the world but through it, and in that flight, in that sacred risk, you will find what every soul seeks, not safety, not control, but meaning. This is the path of those who are willing to feel both smaller and more infinite than ever before. The path of those who have heard the quiet truth behind all chaos, that the universe is not something you stand apart from. It is something that pulses within you, that you are not just in life, you are life. And to live from that truth is to dance with the stars. If you recognized yourself in any of these signs, take heart. Your soul is rising, not in ways the world rewards, but in ways eternity remembers. You are not lost. You are being reborn. You are not breaking down. You are breaking open. In a world that celebrates the visible, honor what's invisible. The soul moves in silence, in surrender, and in truth. Let it rise.